Hi, 7th graders. Today we're going to be working in your Chapter 5 unit packet, and our focus today is going to be 5.1, which is I can write a ratio in simplest form, and I can find the unit rate. As we go through these notes, if you have the green unit packet that you picked up from school, we're going to start on page 2 if you want to follow along, or you may print the blank notes from Google Classroom or follow along on a lined piece of paper. Either way, make sure you're writing these notes down so you have them for 5.1. So in 5.1, we're going to talk about ratios and rates. So kind of a review of what we talked about in 6th grade. So if you remember, a ratio, this is your first blank here, is a comparison of two quantities using division. Ratios can be written 3 different ways. So when we have ratios, we're comparing 2 different things. For example, boys to girls in class, or if you were in band, clarinets to flutes, something along those lines where you're comparing 2 things. An example of a ratio would be 6 to 5. This is how we read ratios, but we can write them 3 different ways. So one is with the word 2, one is with a colon, 6:5, and the last way, which you're going to see the most in 7th grade, is a fraction, 6 to 5. Now, even though this is written as 6/5, we still read it as 6 to 5. The next definition is a rate. A rate is a ratio of 2 quantities with different units. Rates are what we hear most commonly in our real life. So for example, it's $10 for 2 pizzas. That's a rate. Or if I drove 60 miles in 2 hours, that's also a rate. So let's go ahead. This one, we could say 60 miles. And to compare it for a rate, we could say to 2 hours. So since miles and hours are different units, this is a rate. When we have rates, we always write the units because they are different. Another way we could write this is 60, and I'm just going to abbreviate here, miles, colon, 2 hours. And then the last way is a fraction, 60 miles to 2 hours. Now, a special type of rate, a rate with a denominator of 1, is called a unit rate. So a unit rate, it has a denominator of 1. It is per 1 unit. So for example, in this rate here, we had 60 miles in 2 hours. Well, how many miles would I go in 1 hour? I would go 30 because I would just divide both by 2, right? So that would be a unit rate, 30 miles in 1 hour. Or a lot of times you'll see it written out as 30 miles per hour, like this. So as we go through our notes today, we're going to talk about ratios, rates, and unit rates. So let's look at example 1. In example 1, we are finding ratios and rates. There are 45 males and 60 females in a subway car. The subway car travels 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. Find the ratio of males to females and write your ratio in simplest form. So for this one, we're finding the ratio and we're writing it from males to females. Since here, you're also going to notice it said write it in simplest form. When it tells you to write it in simplest form, this means we're going to write it as a fraction. So since we're doing males to females, if we were to write this as a fraction, males is going to go on top, and then our females will be on the bottom. This is a ratio because males and females are both people, so it's the same type of unit we're comparing. If we look here, in my problem, I had 45 males, so 45 is going to go up top over 60 females. 60 will go on the bottom. But now I want to write it in simplest form. So you can use your calculator to help you as you simplify this, but we're going to show our thinking. what could we simplify 45 and 60 by? You might think 5 to start. You might have thought 15. There's a couple different ways you could simplify. But let's say I started by 5, and I would get 9 over 12. But this is not in simplest form yet, because 9 and 12 have a common factor. What could I divide both these by? I could divide both of them by 3. So I would have 3 to 4. 3 to 4 can't be simplified, so this would be my ratio in simplest form. So that would be our answer here. The ratio of males to females is 3 to 4. All right, let's look at B. We want to find the speed of the subway car. Well, when they're asking us for the speed, they're asking us how fast it's going per minute. So what we're really going to find here is our unit rate. Whenever they're asking for speed, they're asking for the unit rate. So if you notice here, it's telling us how fast it's traveling right here. So I have miles to minutes. These are going to be the units that I use. Miles to minutes. They tell us we are going 2.5 miles in 5 minutes. All I'm doing is I'm plugging from what I know up here into a fraction form of a ratio or a rate. But now I want a unit rate. So what that means is I want a denominator of 1. So I'm going to make my denominator 1. Well, how would I go from 5 to 1? I would divide by 5. So what that means is up top, I'm also going to do 2.5 divided by 5, and this is where you can use your calculator. I get 0.5. But now, since it's a unit rate, we always include our units. So I would have 0.5 miles per 1 minute. And a lot of times, like I told you before, you'll see unit rates written out, 0.5 miles per minute. This would be the speed or the unit rate of this subway car. Let's go ahead and look at example 1 on your own now. So we want to find and write the ratios as fractions in simplest form. So here you're looking back at example 1. Just as a reminder, I'm just going to kind of make a note. There were 45 males, and then there were 60 females. So number 1 on your own says, in example 1, find the ratio of females to males. Go ahead and find that ratio in simplest form. Try number 1 now. So for number 1, we were looking for females to males. So I'm going to kind of write this out to start. We know we had 60 females to 45 males. Now I asked you to write this in simplest form. So you may have divided by 5 and then 3 or 3 then 5. I saw that 15 went into both of these, so I'm going to divide both by 15. And when you divide, you would have gotten 4 over 3. This would be my ratio in simplest form. This is what you should have gotten. Now, just kind of a side note, I know we've talked about fractions, simplifying them to 1 1/3, but this is how we simplify fractions. This is not a ratio because we have a whole number, so we're not comparing two things. We keep them as improper fractions. So it's simplest form as improper fractions because we still want to be comparing two things. So our simplest form for this ratio is 4 to 3. Go ahead now and try number 2. It says in example 1, find the ratio of females to total passengers. So go ahead and try that now. So I had females to total passengers. For my females, I had 60 females. That's the number that's going to go on top. And then for your total, what you had to do was add the males and the females together. So 45 plus 60 is 105. But now you had to simplify this. So I'm going to divide by 5 to start. 60 divided by 5 is 12. 105 divided by 5 is 21. But I know I'm not done yet because 3 can go into both of these. So I'll divide both by 3 and I get 4 up top over 7. This can no longer simplify, so my ratio in simplest form of females to total passengers is 4 to 7. Because again, just to kind of make that note for the total, we did 45 plus 60. So this is how we write these ratios in simplest form. Let's go down to extra example 1. Now let's do some practice with finding the unit rate. So for unit rate, remember we're finding per 1 unit. So per 1 unit. And what we want is we want the denominator to be 1. So for this first one, we have the cost of 2 cartons of milk is $5.50. So would it make more sense to find out how much carton we get for $1 or how much we pay for 1 carton? When you go to the store, it's going to tell you how much it costs for 1 carton. When we have these types of problems, one kind of thing you can always remember is money goes on top. Money is super important to us, so it always goes first. We love money, right? So when we write this one, we're going to do money over cartons. So when I set this up, my money that I'm talking about is $5.50. I'm taking that from this problem over 2 cartons. This is from right here. So I put the money on top because we're going to find how much money it is per 1 carton because we're finding the unit rate, so we're finding per 1 unit, making that denominator 1. Well, from 2 to 1, I would divide by 2. So I do 550 divided by 2. And when I plug this into my calculator, I get $2.75. So my unit rate here, I have to include units, would be $2.75 per carton of milk, or just per carton. Now, if you want, you can put per 1 carton, but since I just put per carton, it's kind of given here that this is per 1. But make sure with unit rates, you need to rewrite with units. So let's go ahead and look at number 2. We have Katie pays $90 for 6 yoga classes. So we have dollars, 2 yoga classes, and we have $90 for 6 yoga classes. I'm just kind of taking from here. We want to know what is the cost per 1 unit or per 1 yoga class because that's my unit rate. Go ahead and try this one now. For this one, you would divide by 6. So when you did 90 divided by 6, you should have gotten 15. So your unit rate here was $15 per yoga class, or just $15 per class. Again, make sure you're including your units. Let's look at number 3. We have Lisa walked 48 blocks in 3 hours. Go ahead and find the unit rate for number 3. So for number 3, what we would do is we have Lisa walked 48 blocks in 3 hours. So we're comparing blocks to hours. You should have started with 48 to 3, but we're finding the unit rate, so we're finding per 1. So I would divide by 3, and I would get 16. So your unit rate for how fast Lisa is walking is 16 blocks per hour. And this is how we would find a unit rate. We have one last example to look at. For example 2, let's look at finding a rate from a ratio table now. So this ratio table is given to us, and it says the ratio table shows the cost for different amounts of artificial turf. Find the unit rate in dollars per square foot. So this is telling us we want to find the unit rate. So that means per 1. And the rate that we're looking at is dollars per square foot. So right here, they're telling us how we're going to set this up. We are finding dollars per square feet. So what we can do, since this is a ratio table, this means all of these are equivalent. So they all are equal to the same thing. They're just kind of, if you're seeing here, being multiplied by 4. So I'm going to start with my first one just so I have to simplify the least, or that's just the one I want to start with. So if you notice, cost is on the bottom. So 100 is my cost. I'm going to put that up top with dollars. So be careful with there. The square feet is a 25, so that's going to go here. But I want the unit rate, so I want per 1 square foot. I'm making my denominator 1. So I would divide by 25 here, divide by 25, and I would get 4. So my unit rate here would be $4 per square foot. Now let's say that you were in this ratio table and you chose $1,600 for 400 square feet. You still are going to get the same unit rate. You could choose any of these ratios within this table to find your unit rate. Let's have you try one on your own. So it says the ratio table shows the distance that the International Space Station travels while orbiting Earth. Find the speed in miles per second. So when you look here, where they're telling us to find the speed, remember speed is telling us unit rate, and we are looking at miles per second. So we're going to have miles per second. Go ahead and find the unit rate using this table. So for this one, when you go through to do this, I'm just going to use these first numbers here. You could have used any of these because it's a ratio table, so they're equivalent. My miles is on top, so I'm looking, the distance is the miles, which is bottom, so it's 14.4. Make sure you line up your numbers right. And the time is 3 seconds, so 3 is going to go on the bottom. But I know I'm finding the unit rate, which is the speed, so I'm going to find per 1 second, make the denominator 1. So here I'm going to divide by 3, divide by 3, and when I do 14.4 divided by 3, oops, I plugged that in wrong, sorry, I get 4.8. So my unit rate here that you should have found, or the speed here, was 4.8 miles per second. And this concludes our 5.1 notes. Great job.